Best practices. Two innocent words that launched countless careers, filled endless slides, and justified an untold number of questionable decisions. But here's a provocative thought. If they're truly the best, why do they so often fail? Today on The Architect's Lens, Nenad and Savi dive into why context, culture, and critical thinking might just be killing off traditional best practices. Buckle up. This one's going to get interesting.
Okay, so we're talking today about a very fun topic. It's called best practices.
Ooh.
Yeah, and these are two words that has built careers. It has filled slide decks. And it has justified bad decisions for a long, long time.
Yeah, perfect topic. Yeah, I love it already.
So the question is, if best practices are so best, why the heck do they keep failing?
Okay, so I see we're gonna have an interesting conversation. I would argue that of course, time again, people are failing, right? By, not applying the best practices, right? Or at least not starting from them.
Okay.
Would you agree?
Sure. So what's the difference then?
Yeah, so I would say one thing is that, you get your set of best practices, right? Like a rule. So guys, this is, from years of experience, this is what we learned. These are the, 10 rules for something, right? And we write those 10 rules on our Confluence page, right? And read them in our town hall meeting, right? And then we don't follow them, right? Or we say, but it shouldn't be like that, right?
Yeah.
We really shouldn't have, sprint reviews, daily stand-ups, but we call ourselves Scrum, right? Or something in that sense. So, and then we'll say afterwards that, we tried Scrum, but it failed. I mean, you can try and then adjust and adapt, right? Based, you want to create a best fit. That it's not about blindly following, what somebody told you should follow. I view those as kind of a, groundwork or starting point, right? This is, this is someone who is sharing some experience. Let me see if I can tailor it to what I have, what I need, right? And usually I would say, we try to push the best practices, especially if they are a buzzword, but we actually don't implement them, right? In terms of, we don't follow what they say or the idea that they bring, right? And then we just say after, a year or whatever, we failed, we'll try out this new framework that I just read on the internet, over morning coffee. Guys, you gotta try this, right? Isn't that a case? Or would you say that frameworks are faulty by design?
So, no, frameworks... Okay, here's my thought. So, frameworks have been created for a reason because okay, so there are two sorts of frameworks, right? One is, let's say, a framework like a TOGAF, right? Which came out of industry practices, it came out of a bit of theory, then people put together a framework and they say, okay, this is how things are supposed to work, right? It isn't, and then there are things like what Spotify did with Agile. It is practical implementation. You wouldn't probably call it a framework, but it's loosely used in that sense as well.
Yeah.
And so this is coming from Spotify's actual implementation, their real life experience, and working with that kind of environment.
Yeah.
right? So what worked in Spotify might or might not work in your environment because of cultural differences, maturity, tools, yada yada
Yes.
yada.
Yeah.
But TOGAF kind of a framework is part practical, part experience, part theory put together. So in my mind,
Mhm.
these are two different sort of things. They both have value,
Okay.
but that's
Okay.
how I mentally differentiate between a framework and more of an implementation driven case study
Yeah.
kind of thing from companies and say, okay, this is work
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
Does that make
I
sense?
agree. Yeah, I agree that like Spotify framework is actually not a framework; it's implementation. And then some people thought that it would work if we copy paste the setup, right, and the
Yeah, yeah.
organizational structure and everything, and disregard all else, right?
Hmm.
So in that sense, I agree. Is it okay to blindly follow? Right. I mean, TOGAF is one of the most comprehensive, boring.
Might I throw in safe there as well?
Yes, this is for sure.
Just for the fun of it,
Yeah, and I don't think it doesn't have value, right?
Yeah.
But in my view, it's good if you have, for instance, such a mature, branched out architecture management that you have like at least 5 level of architects, and you're managing 100,000 people,
Correct.
right, and 20,000 application systems. I don't know what, right? Then having that kind of a robust framework, makes sense, because it's basically you need to standardize how architecture will be governed.
Yeah.
Okay, but in most cases, it really doesn't make sense to blindly do TOGAF, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it really depends, how you tailor it, and you need to tailor whatever framework to what you actually need to do, or what you actually want to achieve, basically.
Yeah, it's like grandmother saying, right? If your best friend jumps into the river, will you also jump? It's the same analogy.
Yeah, depends on the friend, right? If
What
you
if the
know
friend
his
is IBM?
reasoning, if you know his reasoning, right, and that he will jump only if really, really necessary, then I'll jump, right? Then I'll know that there's no other way but jump. But other thing where, for instance, I like frameworks and maybe even being a framework Nazi, so to speak, is when you need to break certain cultural behaviors and patterns, right? And you need to institute something new, right? Basically, you need to rebuild new baseline, which you will use to tailor the processes, the workflows, etc., right? If kind of organizational culture is, really blocking certain progress, and you cannot, move away from it, then you need to enforce, I would say, so that you can model out something better, hopefully, right? But culture trumps frameworks always, so it's never successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But maybe you do that one small step, right? Maybe you are unable to do the whole journey, but you introduce one small step.
Yeah, one of the consultants that I met several years back, he used to say, always take a reference framework and then dumb it up or down based on your audience.
Yeah, I agree. And but this is basically like I would say, take out like simplest statements, right? dumb it down, fine, but into simplest ideas that this framework, is doing or wants to do, right? Like in Agile frameworks is, increased delivery speed or development speed, right? This is kind of, I wouldn't say by all means, but, do whatever you need to do what works for you to be able to, reach that goal. And if we don't know how to do that, fine, let's start from something that is best practice, right, for that kind of outcome. And we'll tailor it, right? We'll adjust.
Okay, so I want to talk about that part. Then we'll tailor it, right? So if you were to go into an organization, would you start with the strictest adherence to a framework and then sort of water it down and dilute it down over a period of time to say, okay, this is what the framework says, let's follow all of this and slowly drop the shackles? Or do you go the other way around where you start very loose, see how it adapts, and then start adding in and making it more robust? What's your preferred direction?
Well, I would, first you need to see like what doesn't work or what you feel that is missing that can be substituted by a framework doctrine or a framework dogma, right? Like, you have development teams that are now working hybrid, remotely. Nobody speaks to each other, right? And communication is always the most important, right? Part of any functional team, right? So then you would maybe, insist like, guys, we need to meet in person, be in one room, have this, stand-ups where we are forced to speak with each other for 15 minutes, right? Because again, you have people who tend to sit in their chairs and not speak to the person, opposite. Yeah. So like force communication, force this kind of interaction until it becomes normal, right? Then, then I won't need a stand-up, right? Because people will talk amongst themselves. They don't even need to be in the same room, right? They will talk amongst themselves. So this is kind of the point. Some things need to be maybe forced to break this culture or, social barrier that maybe even technology,
Yeah, maybe technology is good,
as well, you need to shove technology down someone's throat until they eat it up. Unfortunately, there is always blockers of change. People don't like to change, right? So they will usually not react very, very how to say, favorable, to any kind of change. And this is I would say that this is kind of a recipe, right? You need to first identify what is the critical thing that is missing, right? Maybe what is the critical path to what you want to achieve, and if no other way, then enforce certain rules. It could be a framework, whatever. But you need to break that habit that the organization is having in order to move them a step closer, right? I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense.
You don't, nothing of that sort comes like with, IKEA set of instructions where you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and you get a wardrobe or a chair or whatever, right?
Yeah,
it's usually much more.
Enterprise is a little more complicated than assembling a table.
Depends on which table, but in general. But I always I want to touch upon how DevOps is or isn't treated as a framework, right? Because in my comprehension, right? It's just a bunch of stuff that's thrown into this.
Yeah, just set up some Jenkins and create 3 pipelines and you're done. What is the big deal?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't like. Maybe I'm overthinking things again, right? But so DevOps kind of, this is my interpretation, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Matured as a, to fill the gap between, you would have developers, which are the coding and yada, and then you have the guys that need to make sure that this is running in production, and that, customers, clients, whatever, are happy and everything is hunky-dory. Response times, resilience, the time to they run. And of course, those guys never talk to each other at all, right? And the developers didn't care the environment their app will be running. If it runs on my machine, then it's perfect. If it runs on my machine just for me, then most certainly it will be okay if I put it out to 10 million users, right? It's basically the same thing, right? Yeah. So with the, I don't know, kind of maturing all of the, let's call them IT practices, right? This is, from, I don't know, days of Agile Manifesto and, creating communities of practice. Kind of DevOps is, again, a set of best practices, principles. I wouldn't call it framework. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's here to kind of touch on it basically, in my view, maybe just brought code to sysadmins and made everything, finally sysadmins could code their infrastructure, right? It bridged the gap, right?
I would say it gave them a voice.
For sure.
Yeah,
I mean, they did have a voice, but it was heard only when
it was very far away. They were screaming, nobody was hearing it.
When everything was, failing in production, then they were heard. But
too late, too little. That's all.
Yeah. How is that? Is that achieved? The bridging of the gap.
That's like saying, we've invented the electric car maybe 10, 15 years back. Have we stopped polluting the world? We will never. Right? So that gap, as long as there are 2 human beings, that'll always be there. And that's because it's fundamental.
They have different problems, right?
They have different problems, and their approach to software is different, right? As a developer, my approach is, hey, this is what I'm supposed to code, and I want to code this well, and I want to ship it off as soon as possible. Get it off my plate, because then I have the next thing to code. Right? That's how a developer would look at it.
Yeah.
And as an operations guy, you would say, hey, hang on. Before I put this in production, I have to make sure I don't break anything. This thing has to scale. It has to be secure. All of that has to happen. So hang on, wait, let's check, let's be double sure. Wait, hold your horses. It's fundamental conflict. Right? Difference of...
Okay. Yeah, I agree. It's a fundamental conflict. They have different problems they need to solve. And often enough, they are not in conflict, right? But maybe they create problems for one another, and that's why there's so much animosity right between them.
Yeah. So the way things have evolved, right? If you take slightly more mature organizations, then they are going and saying, hey, now you code it, you build it, you deploy it, you run it.
Yes.
So suddenly it's not somebody else's problem, it's your problem as well.
Yeah, right? but what they also tend to do is kind of put the DevOps guy in the team, and it becomes his problem.
So that's not how you solve that problem. You have the DevOps guy put in the tooling and the observability, and then bugger off that guy.
Yeah.
Let him go away.
Yeah.
And this team maintains it.
Yeah.
With the platform, if you call it, or whatever you want to call it. The tools, the technology, the observability, all of that. Right? Which is where some brilliant guy came up with the word, let's call them platform engineers. Why not?
Yeah, that's another podcast. But so the idea is that, development teams or product teams have the necessary tool to basically bring their product to the hands of a customer, right? And we're now in the era of digital products, so different digital channels. So, a mobile phone, for instance, so I need to put that product in customers' hands. And DevOps guys are my delivery chain, right? They put that in the hands of a customer. It's the term DevOps culture, right? That's also kind of heavily used. Is it
abused?
Yeah. I didn't say it, but maybe it was in my voice.
I heard it.
Is it has it transformed like the organizations, right? Or is it just within the DevOps community that they now have something they call culture and feel important?
That was brutal. So I think it is that. But it has worked at places in different degrees, shapes, and forms, right? And I've seen it work very differently in different organizations. But so that's why there is no, standard answer to this, because everybody's DevOps is different.
Have you heard of an organization that went through this cultural shift that was basically fueled by maturing DevOps practices, and this is something that kind of changed everything for that organization or a product? And I mean that in terms of we didn't have DevOps, then we started and implemented it, rather than Spotify probably was full on DevOps integrated from day one, right?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but there I would say DevOps, whatever, transformation or whatever you call it, was one part of the puzzle, right? Along with that has to be a technology transformation as well, because that alone will not solve your problem, or it will solve it to a certain degree. The ways of working have to change. That is why when you see large transformation programs going in, technology transformation, that is coupled by an agile transformation, a DevOps transformation, refactoring of the roles and responsibilities. All of this come together, and then hopefully it works to some degree, right? So all of these pieces have to come. Just putting in some pipelines, throwing in some tools will give you advantage, will give you speed, but it will not probably give you what was promised in the La La Land.
This is kind of continuing on our digital transformation failing session. So, I mean, you mentioned a lot of transformations, right? Is there? I mean, there's definitely transformation fatigue or framework fatigue. There is a new transformation coming our way. How do you deal with that? And this is, I would say, problem for big organizations, right?
Bigger ones, yes.
Yeah.
So I think now maybe in the last year or so, I've seen the transformation trend decrease now. Right now, it is more like smaller groups trying to do something, which they prove, and then the enterprise is saying, okay, this thing has worked in this group. How do we scale it up?
Okay.
It's not going big bang, it's going the other direction. So this group has done infrastructure as code, this group has moved to the cloud, they've broken a monolith into microservices. It's working, it's scaling up well. We've gone from 20 developers to 200 developers. Makes sense, we are doing things much better, faster. Now how do we scale to 20,000?
What do you think has brought on this change in approaches? Like the history of failed
same thing that you said, right? Transformation fatigue. Everybody's tired of those big buzzwords. Now they're coming to reality and saying, okay, let's prove things and let's scale it up slowly and evolve them as we go.
But one of the, just like thinking, one of the problems I would like see is how can, how does an organization afford to have like testing team that is able to build something that is so decoupled from an organization that it's able to introduce new things, right? Like when I have mature DevOps and I have my microservice platform, then I can have a team that will build microservices decoupled from everything else and will build. But how do I do that if I don't have it?
No, it's not just about decoupling. It's even in testing area, right? Folks are now moving away from the traditional Selenium world into using more AI-based tools where it's less of coding, and if you move one pixel, your whole thing doesn't break. Right?
Again,
it can identify changes on its own. So there are smarter tools available for testing, which reduce the maintenance part of it. Even doing that reduces the debt quite a lot.
Yeah, it kind of reduces the friction, the hoops that you need to go through to be able to build and deploy, right?
Yeah.
So what is then the end goal, right? It's basically to void all frameworks, right? And just focus on the next hurdle, the next step that you need, whether it's, developing new feature, whether it's, deploying or basically handing it over to the testing then customer, right?
I think
regardless.
I think first there has to be some kind of a mental map on what is our North Star. What do we want to do? Because because all of this mumbo jumbo has to be tied to business value, because somebody has to fund this, right?
Yeah.
So you start from there. What's the business problem I'm trying to solve? Do I have too many defects? Do I need to go faster because competition is catching up? Do I need to enter another country, so I need to scale up? What's my business problem? Who will fund all of this? Right? And then from there you go to, okay, to do this, these are the 5 things that I need to do. I'm not talking tools, technologies yet. I'm saying these are the capabilities that I need to get to solve this business problem. And then you stop there. Then you don't get a framework underneath it. You stop there. And then you start working backwards. You say, okay, this is what we want to go. This is the business problem it solves. Let's solve 10% of that business problem through something. Then add another 5%. That's how you show value to business, and they will continue to fund it. Otherwise, you run out of juice.
Yeah, but this is for instance one problem I have. It's not a problem. It's just conceptually.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to understand, the top level business, I would say, requirements, or how am I going to fix where my business is failing? I need to identify from business perspective what I need to do, and this is kind of my then business strategy or business goals at least, right? And then somebody, let's call it person and architect, maybe, will need to
people like us. That's where we come in.
We'll need to, figure, okay, how especially if we're talking about big organizations, how can I translate or formulate the business goals I want to achieve to the feature team's backlog, right? How will this team, end up contributing to the goal and have that traceability?
No, I understand your question, and this can get very, very complicated because you can get into, get inside of Jira and come out, swim out somewhere else, where you create business strategy and yada, 20 levels deep until you get a backlog. I'm not talking about that. That is a different podcast. It's a different wormhole.
It's a different animal, yeah. But in general, I would say, so my again experience, there are kind of two use cases, right, or two kind of embodiment of this problem. One is that I don't have or don't understand my business goals. I honestly don't have a business strategy. I have some product. It's doing some sales, there's money coming in, but I honestly don't know what I want 5 years down the line. And then, so basically no vision, and then you cannot translate it into kind of meaningful work for product teams in terms of, we know where we want to go.
The reason I say that is important is because things like creating a new feature, right? Fixing defects. They have you can make a direct correlation to ROI. Say, I introduced this new feature, 50,000 users used it, I got the bang for the buck. Right? Putting in infrastructure as code is very tough to correlate in terms of ROI. Unless, your infrastructure itself is failing and you have basic level trouble. Beyond that, it's tough to correlate.
You can, it's tough to correlate when it works. You can correlate when it doesn't.
Correct. Exactly. That's what I meant. Yeah,
because if, you have good DevOps guys and everything works, then, you don't understand the pains of, building
the magic behind it.
The magic behind it, right? The second kind of example is when you have business goals that are so vague that they don't make any sense at all. It's not relatable with anything, right? And they're and the problem is, so what you mentioned, you need to have something that is measurable, something that I can relate to my ROI, or I need to have, again, some kind of measurable KPI. This is how I validate my business success, right? I don't know. I onboarded 10,000 new users in a month. This is how I measure success, right? And maybe, again, tracing back, if I have, everything works, then I don't know what is the value that DevOps or even architecture or whatever brought into the story. But in the end, I know that all of the steps actually, made it possible for me to, scale from one user to 10,000 in 1 month, right? But if you have that kind of KPIs, right? Then your development or product teams and your DevOps teams can understand the requirement. Okay, guys, we need, to build a system that will be able to accept 10,000 or 100,000 new users every month. So this thing needs to scale like this. We need this kind of infrastructure. So in terms of defining your goals, from business, having a concrete KPIs, and then this is something that kind of helps teams. And this is, I think, also kind of the missing link, right? To go back on, the pushing frameworks and whatever to people, because we see that, I don't know, they're not motivated, or the delivery rate is slow. Maybe they just don't understand what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Motivation is an important factor.
It is. That's why a lot of these things fail.
Yeah.
You don't see value.
So what is next for DevOps? This is my question, and the last one, and then we can. Yeah.
What is next for DevOps?
Yeah.
I think the next is.
And don't say AI.
Oh shit! I was about to say that.
No. Sorry, I interrupted.
Not just AI, but overall, the way we are developing software, it will fundamentally change over the next 5-6 years. Not tomorrow, not day after. Right?
Okay.
Because of advances everywhere, not just AI.
Yeah.
You even looking at quantum computing being more popular than it is in maybe the next 5-7 years. Right? So when those kind of things come in, now GPUs are becoming cheaper. So experimentation is different. So I would say we've been doing DevOps for 30 years, maybe more, right? When I was in Siemens in the early 2000s, even before the term DevOps was coined, we have a homegrown CI system which was 10,000 plus lines of Perl code. Some dude had written that. Even that was DevOps, right? We didn't know to call it DevOps. Right? So we've been creating software, building it, shipping it for a long time. Those principles will remain same. But what we are building, at that point, I was telling somebody last week, we used to build on 9 flavors of Linux and 8 flavors of Windows.
Yeah.
Today, that problem doesn't exist. I used to be a clear case admin, right? And we used to manually sync changes across 5 sites. This change has reached here, as it reached US, has it reached UK. No, damn, the network packet dropped. So go in the queue, add that packet. I don't know all that shit. Today with GitHub, you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
So the fundamentals will remain. Tomorrow we'll be thinking how to build pipelines for quantum computes, how to handle these LLMs and specialized LLMs, and how do I integrate that? How do I do a bill of material for all of this?
You will have an AI agent doing that, right? You will not need to, right?
Yeah,
you have Terraform MCPs that agent will just use to provision whatever they need now. So, whatever.
No, I agree. So I think the time is coming where you will have specialized agents for very specialized tasks, and they will be very good at that. What you will need is orchestrators on top of agents.
Yeah.
And somebody to orchestrate the orchestrator. Enterprise architect. We will all be enterprise architects. That's what we need.
I wanted to say that those two will be replaced by an agent soon. No problem.
Then you
just
manage
give it
them.
a month or so.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
Okay. So Avi, you can close our session with some words of encouragement.
Of course. So, like you can see, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
It's an oncoming
Whether
train.
the light's coming towards you or not is a question. But there is light. And what we're basically saying is, get inspired from the frameworks. Take the good things. Just don't blindly copy them. Dumb them to your context, your maturity level, and then build value at each step and somewhere in the middle it'll meet. I think that's what we're saying. What's your thought?
Same. And then at the end, you just make up a new framework out of it, and the cycle begins.
And then you start again.
Savi, thank you for another session, and thanks for all the listeners out there, and see you next time.
Cheers, guys. Bye.